All righty, we'll start up. The notice of public meeting, Liberty County Commissioners Court, Liberty County, Texas. Today is June the 9th, about 8:45, and we're having a public meeting for the Commissioners Court to consider vote centers for Liberty County, Texas. And you're our elections administrator. Would you like to give any description of this, or we're just going to sit back and wait for public comment?
I will give you a brief primer on what the vote center, as people are checking in and getting ready for Commissioner's Court. Commissioners, most a packet that I've hand delivered. Does anyone need one? Leave.
I don't know.
You left yours at the office. How did you leave something? So
I have one.
you have yours. Does anyone else need one? All right. How many of you early vote in this county? Okay.
Okay.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Except me. I'm the only one that does not early vote in this room, it sounds like. All right. A vote center is basically an early voting location, except it's an early voting location on election day. A vote center does not tie you to your home precinct. On election day, if I want to vote in Dayton, right now I can't. I have to be in Hardin. That's my home voting precinct. A vote center will allow any citizen, no matter where they're at in the county or where they live, as long as they go to a voting location, it will allow them to vote. Most counties in Texas are going to vote centers. The process to get a vote center is you have to have an application to state. We are working on that. And you have to have 2 public hearings. You have to have an elections advisory committee. We do have a committee that's got 15 people on it. Multiple folks from different cities representing the city councils, different partners that work in elections for this county. Vote centers will save the county money. Presently, we spend about $30,000 on early voting. That's with 4 locations. Vote centers, right now we have 30 precincts in the county. I'm going to show you this map. All the precincts that are colored will have a vote center. Commissioners, each one of you will have at least 4 to 6 vote centers in your particular precinct. This does have to be recorded. We do have to send a copy of this meeting to state with the application. We are required to have 60% of our voting precincts to have vote centers the first time that we do vote centers. So we have to have 20 voting locations on election day. I'm proposing that we have 20 voting locations spread out throughout the county. That's most of our most populated areas, and it combines quite a few of the voting precincts. For example, you have the City of Liberty, City Hall is a voting precinct today, and then you have the Jack Hartel building as a voting precinct today. That's less than 200 yards from each other. Yet the current law says that we must have both of them open on election day. If the county goes to vote centers, we consolidate boxes like that. So my proposal is to not open City Hall as an election location. We'll consolidate that to Jack Hartel, and that's how you get to the 20 voting locations throughout the county. The least amount of voting locations that you can have for any election is 15 voting centers. Basically, you're already at vote centers. Everybody in this room except me already votes in early voting. A voting center is early voting basically on election day. The key to it, you have to have election equipment that can function. Lee bought that, I believe, less than a year ago and purchased a very good, adequate system that the county can use for at least, I hope, another 15 years. She also purchased no ink poll pads. That's the key to vote centers. You have to be able to electronically check in. You're required to have an electronic check-in process because if Clint votes in Dayton, Clint should not be able to vote in Hardin. When I vote in Dayton, it instantly logs me in and it tells Hardin and every other vote location that I've already voted. So he cannot vote again. That's the security of it. How do we guarantee that? Well, we're going to have Verizon hotspots if the location already doesn't have internet. Most of our locations have internet already. So we'll have a Verizon hotspot in case the internet goes down. If Verizon goes down, we're also going to have an AT&T hotspot. If that goes down, all internet goes down. Hopefully we have cell phones or we have phones. We will call the office that is on the backup system that can actually check in the voter and then push the data out to all the other voting locations. Do we have any questions about vote centers for Liberty County?
And you haven't kind of responses you have. You haven't any response yet.
I have not had any negative response. I've really tried to play the devil's advocate through this, and we have not been able to poke a hole in it.
So on not only voting, but election day,
Yes,
you
sir.
can still go to any of these centers,
Yes,
no matter whether it's in your precinct or not.
Correct. You can vote in Cleveland.
Mhm.
It may be just a little, but I think it's going to go over well. I really like the locations you got, especially in precinct 2, because the north part of the county, they're always complaining having to drive. You're well aware of that. You do have one more thing here where it says Romare, you got that in precinct 3, that's in precinct 2.
I'm sorry about that.
That's all right.
I'll get that fixed.
Okay.
Well, it could
I
be
was just
precinct
like-
2 of the voting.
What's the board of the
Thank you.
But that could be the precinct elect. Just
Precinct 3 is Hardin, but I will look into it and see what's.
Well, this is more, it's commissioner precincts.
Okay. All right. I'll fix it.
It's not the,
It is our policy for the elections committee and the elections board, and mine particularly, I do not want anybody to drive more than 15 miles to vote. They're having to drive really more than 10 miles to vote. They're probably not going to vote. Romare, Nolan, and Rye is a particular spot. Those folks, they normally have to drive to Hardin or Moss Hill to vote, and that's too far.
well, that's a.
Romare will always have a voting center if this goes into effect.
That's eliminated a lot of confusion though. We've had, in every election, people go to one poll,
Yes.
oh, you gotta go over here.
That is the biggest complaint on election day that you hear is, I'm sorry, you have to go vote here. Well, then they just don't vote at all. This will eliminate that 100%. And if I have 200 people in Dayton sitting at the Dayton Civic Center in line, they can go to the Dayton High School or they can go to another voting center that maybe does not have a line. And it will also allow me to deploy our machines more adequately. I can have a couple of more machines at Dayton because I don't have to staff 30 voting locations.
Yeah.
More questions? Any more comments?
Anybody?
Well, is it public comment?
Yes, it is.
All right, I'm gonna stand up and say something. All right. As y'all know, I'm a Republican chairman,
Okay.
but I just wanted to tell y'all, when I worked elections in the past as an election judge, I mean, I worked here in Liberty, I've worked here at Rye, we've worked in Dayton, I've worked in Dayton. The biggest issue I saw that this would alleviate was at 6:50, somebody shows up at the polling place on election day and they show you the registration card. And it's like, oh, well, you got to go drive 15 minutes that way. And they didn't get to vote. I mean, that happened pretty much every time I worked the poll. So this would alleviate that problem as long as they're registered in the county, they get to vote, no questions asked. And that's pretty much all I've got to say.
Good deal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
It actually does happen quite regularly that someone will move from, let's
Yeah.
say Dayton to Kennebec, and they don't realize they're in a different precinct now, and they get very frustrated that they can't vote where their neighbors are voting.
Right.
This will alleviate those problems.
Election day, I've seen elderly come in and confused about where they're supposed to be, and they just go on back home. They don't even know. I think this is a good thing.
All right. No other comments? Chief, you don't have a comment today? You're happy? I'm happy. Yeah.
Right. I'm part of the process.
Mayor, anything that you, we're just talking about vote. We're gonna make,
Finally get here, about stepping through.
we're trying to make it easier so you can go vote. That's just it. Yeah. All right.
There will be one little challenge to this. If the COVID stuff stays in place, which I think it will, voting centers will create longer lines. We just have to be a little more diligent about spacing people, really emphasizing that you can come any time of the day and you can come other than election day. Try to get them to take advantage of the extra week of early voting and, you know, hopefully not get too many people in line at 7 o'clock at night, because policing those lines and keeping people distanced apart and dealing with all the COVID stuff on top of new voting centers is going to be a challenge. So, but I think we've been talking about it a lot, and I think that they're ready for it. It's just, you know, in the most recent primaries they had at the end of this COVID thing, that was the biggest thing they saw was lines. A lot of people, and trying to keep them spaced apart. You get 200 people in line, 6 feet apart. That's a lot of a lot of lines. So that's the challenging part. You keep making sure everybody keeps their hands clean and keeping the surfaces clean and all that. But
Clint, do you see any possibility in the future of the early voting extensions, even for the November election? You've got an extension already for the primary runoff.
Yes, sir. Normally runoffs have 1 week of early voting.
Right.
The governor did suspend election law and extended it by another week.
Mm-hmm.
I do not know by November. I don't think we will know until we reach the second wave of COVID, and I guess the data tells.
Okay.
That would be a very long time to have 3 weeks of early voting, but I would doubt it just by Texas's response to the mail-in ballot issue. I monitor it every day because it changes every day. Harris County yesterday ordered their brand new county clerk ordered their elections department to mail every voter over 65 an application to vote by mail. I believe it was a little over 400,000 pieces of mail that went out, but they are doing that. They did it. So I'm watching with open ears, open eyes, and a closed mouth.
Good move.
I will say one thing about November. That one's on us. We pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
County pays for that.
Right.
One of the things they are recommending or were recommending, and I think they will continue to recommend, is that we stay open all day Saturday and a good chunk of Sunday in between the 2 weeks for the presidential election. And I think we talked about that. That's a very good idea. So you probably will have a weekend voting opportunity beyond what you get to do right now in Liberty County for that big election in November. But that's probably the only extension we're going to get.
It makes sense if they did. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Got anything? Well, let's go ahead and close out this public hearing. Considerations for elections vote centers. And we'll revisit this again in 2 weeks, Clint.
Yes, sir.
And for another public hearing. And then it's Katie bar the door after that, pretty much. Okay. All right. Good job.